Welcome. This is the first of what we hope is 2, 3, 4 part speaker series that the LCA is putting on in collaboration with Lamont Manhattan Prep. And Liz Eisenberg, raise your hand Liz, is actually chairing the LCA speaker series. So we really thank her work in advance. We are going to video this, and so it'll be available on the website so people can see it in case they couldn't make it tonight. We realize the timing isn't the best, but we appreciate those of you showing up tonight. In the future, we will podcast as well. So we're going to get all that techie stuff and appropriate for tonight. Before we start with our conversation with Michael Levine and Digital Play, I'd like to introduce members of our advisory board. We have a group of individuals who very accomplished individuals, not that everyone in this room isn't, who really come in twice a year and share their ideas about Lamont Manhattan and really how we can best position ourselves in New York City and how we can make sure that the education we're providing your students is the finest there is. So first of all, I'd just like for them to stand up when I call their name. I'd like to have Grace Ball stand up. Grace is an educational consultant now, but for many years she was the head of admissions at the lower school for Riverdale. So we're very glad to have you. Jack Gantos. Jack Gantos is a Newbery Award winner, author of 47 different books and counting. Close, very good. And the Pritzker Honor Award-winning author. So he actually came visit our school last year. We conducted a city-wide contest for 8th graders, and the winner of that contest actually has a scholarship at Lamont Manhattan for 4 years. So we're very glad to have Jack with us and influence. Jenny Goldstein. Jenny actually was with PBS as the educational vice president, senior vice president for education for PBS for over 20 years. And now she's president of the Goldstein Consulting Group. Thank you. And Jenny and Michael know each other quite a bit through their connections. Lee Stetson. Lee Stetson is the former dean of undergraduate admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. Travels around the world right now as a consultant on having students and preparing students for that college admissions process, making sure they want to get into their college of choice. And then also we have Matt Gamsey with us, who's on the advisory board as well. He's CEO of Meritas. Jane Turker is the vice chair of the advisory board. Thank you, Jane. And now I get to introduce another member of our advisory board who is our special guest tonight, and that's Michael Levine. As you've read, we're certainly very fortunate to have Michael with us. He's the director of the Joan Gans Cooney Center at Sesame Street Workshop. Previously, Michael was with the Carnegie Corporation, and he did some groundbreaking work in early childhood development, education, and media and primary reform, grades reform. And then also before, well, you've done a lot of stuff. You're senior advisor to the New York City Schools Chancellor, yes, where you directed dropout prevention, frequent advisor to the White House, very good, and PBS and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But I think the most impressive item on his resume is that he was named by Working Mother magazine as one of America's most influential leaders in shaping America and family and children's policy. Quite impressive.
What do they know?
So thank you.
Thank you so much,
And
Drew.
Michael is on a very tight schedule, and we have about 45 minutes. So what the format is, I have a few questions here that I'm going to ask Michael. He'll respond to those questions, and then we're going to open up to the audience with the time remaining. Is that all right?
Sure. I
Okay.
also have a pop quiz in my pocket.
Has a pop quiz as well.
Any of the students in the audience here want to take it?
So, Michael, if you would, just start out by telling us a little bit about the Cooney Center and the Sesame Workshop. What is the mission? And how does it relate to education and parenting?
Sure. Pleasure to be here. Hi, you guys. We shouldn't make this too formal. Before I start, how many of you guys know about the global reach of Sesame Workshop, kind of vaguely? Or you know what Sesame Street is, right? So Sesame Street.
Why don't you start with that, if you know Sesame Street, and then we got...
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of been around for a while. It's been around for now 45 years, believe it or not. It's gone through, you know, the better part of 3 generations. So Sesame Street reaches, we like to call it the longest street in the world. It reaches 150 countries and about 150 million children and families every week. I bet you didn't know that. Through a whole variety of different original programming that is created with support from people like Ginny Goldstein's, you know, current group at PBS. Original programming here in the U.S. and in many countries is supported by a whole range of different organizations around the world. And the mission is all about making sure that kids get a decent start, they get a lively start in life towards their lifelong learning and educational discovery. About 6 years ago, I was invited to found the Joan Gans Cooney Center. Joan founded Sesame Street in 1969, actually after a cocktail party in New York City with a couple of her co-founders, came up with this idea that television could be educational. And one of the really elegant ideas she had, beyond the fact that you could use television to educate preschoolers to learn their numbers and their colors and their shapes and their sizes, was that you could also entertain, engage, and connect generations around media. So therefore, up until this day, you're seeing things like celebrities, skits. My personal favorite right now is Home Lamb. And there's a whole range of other things that are going on the show. So Sesame Street decided 6 years ago that they wanted to look at all the new digital innovations that are kind of going on around the world, game-based learning, mobile learning, new technologies in education and the like. And they hired me to start a new center, which is named for Joan. We do a whole variety of different work, focusing on older kids, actually, because it's been our research. Our research has sort of demonstrated that kids sort of in this middle childhood period from, let's say, 5 to 12, typically elementary school age, are very, very early adapters and adopters of technology, but that the educational media choices 45 years after Sesame Street started are rather good for preschoolers, but rather weak for kids in the middle. And you guys who are parents, how many of you are parents of kids in that age range may agree? Since we started, however, the world has changed very, very quickly. So we started out kind of trying to take a look at big issues like, you know, how come so many fourth graders in the United States, after so much investment, don't know how to read? And don't know how to read to learn on a sort of a pathway to academic success. And we're still very keenly interested in that, but we've expanded our scope to think about emerging issues like, what does the touchscreen platform mean? Is it a game changer in terms of the interactive capabilities that children have beginning at age 2 and 3? Or should we just, you know, encourage parents to turn it off? Which is, you know, a good idea sometimes. So we began to look at the new technologies since we began work. You know, Drew, it's 6 years, and I'm wearing this, you know, wearable technology now. There's no such thing as a wearable. I mean, 6 years ago, there's no iPad. There's no iPhone. You know, smartphones were, you know, barely, you know, around. We had, you know, all sorts of new, you know, companies. No Twitter, no Instagram, no Snapchat. So all the things that are sort of our current
I think
social...
you're making us feel real old right
I mean,
now. But
yeah, we're all old. I mean, you must know what most of those things are, but kids are wearing technology today. So it's our mission to kind of go in and get a look at how these technologies, you know, obviously we want to make sure that they're not doing harm to kids as our first priority, but more importantly for us, what is the potential of digital technologies of many different forms to accelerate children's learning. And we're particularly interested in low-income and minority kids because that's sort of part of the Sesame DNA.
So what areas of technological innovations do you feel like have the greatest impact on education outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the very young kids, believe it or not, television as sort of the older technology is still king. And Ginny knows this, that the majority of, so we'll release a study next month. We do a bunch of different studies both national quantitative studies, ethnographic qualitative field research where we're talking to children and their parents and their educators. Different kinds of tracking and mapping studies to, for example, I wrote a report about 4 or 5 months ago called Pioneering Literacy in the Digital Wild West. We sort of refer to the deluge of media choices a little bit as the Wild West. And we're sort of trying to be like Lewis and Clark, guiding people a little bit through it. But it just depends a lot on the age of the kid. So what we're seeing is that in the younger kids, as I mentioned before, this touchscreen interactive technology is a real game changer. For older kids, sort of when I started the center 6 years ago, the kind of average age of first video gameplay was like 7 or 8. Now it's like 3 or 4. Through the apps marketplace. So gaming is becoming very, very prominent. It used to be that the image of a gamer was, some 16-year-old boy or 22-year-old, young man who was, doing first-person shooters 6 and 7 hours, a day. Now, games have become very social. Many girls are very involved in them. Games are making their way into classrooms in every sector of American, life and global life now. Everything's getting gamified. So we're taking a look at games. We're very, very active in thinking about the value or lack thereof of social networking forums. What does it mean? What's the Twitter of tomorrow? And where can kids actually get real educational value? How many of you have even heard of Yville? I mean, Yville is a community of millions of middle school kids, where kids are learning about viruses and STEM education and a variety of new sort of hypothesis testing inquiry skills. Or have any of you heard of the app company Tokaboka? So, all right, so one. Tokaboka in 18 months. Tokaboka is a Scandinavian publishing company. It's a derivative of a Scandinavian publishing company that decided to completely reinvent themselves about 3 years ago. In the past 18 months, they have built, having studied play and learn patterns from the 1970s and 80s, all the best-selling toys, Mattel, Hot Wheels, Parker board games, they have now appified in a range. They have 10 of the top 50 bestsellers. And what they've decided to do is to just reinvent creative play through apps that are everything from pajama parties to tea parties to all the daily rituals that parents don't really know how to integrate into daily lives, reading apps and so on. They've had 33 million downloads in the last 18 months. So we're looking at social media, games and learning with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, really trying to look into academic research labs. Who's prototyping the simulations and the games of tomorrow that will teach history and geography and languages to today's board students who might be more engaged through gameplay?
Okay, so you mentioned that girls are playing as well. Is there any research that says one gender over the other at an early age is more prone to go and play the digital games?
Boys do like more action-oriented games. I mean, boys really do tend to be, and obviously it's a crazy generalization, which, is no doubt false for the minority, I would say. Boys do like action video games more than girls. Although there are these crossover, products like, how many of you know about Little Big Planet, or you all know about Minecraft? You've heard of Minecraft? Many of you have, okay? Because it's like crack cocaine. I mean, it is so compelling. It is so thoughtful, and it is so annoying for parents. I mean, try to grab your 11-year-old away from Minecraft. Just another minute. But I would just say this. Folks who I'm working with now are looking at things like Minecraft. There's actually a guy who some of you may know. His name is Joel Leveny. He's a teacher at Columbia Prep. Has left Columbia Prep to create the Minecraft EDU. And so Minecraft EDU will debut in about a month. It's a collaboration with Eline Media here in New York, which is a small independent game company. And they will be taking this addiction and pivoting it a little bit towards math and science and other kinds of skills that you're learning, spatial, geography. Minecraft is quite a global phenomenon now. So people are actually taking a look at commercial game properties as well as academic, research lab properties and trying to figure out, for example, many of your kids will be taking standardized tests very soon online. So all of the big standardized test companies, College Board, ACT, are designing online games to accompany the Common Core standards and the advanced preparation tests for college now. So it's very, very interesting. Games are here to stay.
And we just piloted that for ERBs in pre-K 4, Ks, and 1s.
Yeah.
With using their iPads.
So I think look, games can be very, very disruptive, and we're doing a lot of research on this. And I wouldn't say that apps and games are the only thing that you guys should be paying attention to, because I do think a lot of new other technology innovations are going to make a big difference in children's lives and in adults' lives very soon. Augmented reality is back, for example. Voice recognition software is back, for example. And there's all sorts of ways in which those will enhance learning for a lifetime, I believe. But games are unique in a few ways. One, you have a great system of personalized learning here, and they are personalized. I mean, they're leveled. There is immediate feedback. Failure is not only an option, it's a preference. It's part of the engagement process. These are very, very positive attributes. You can personalize very, very quickly around a variegated school environment and a differentiated classroom experience for kids. They're not just supplementary. They can become core for a lot of learners who are actually adding e-learning platforms like MOOCs, these massively open online courseware. So you guys have heard of the MOOCs? Yeah. Anybody taking a course right now? Take one. The uptake from a lot of the MOOCs is not very positive, but I'm taking one that university professors, Kurt Squire and Constance Steinkuhler are teaching about games and learning right now. There's only 32,000 other people who are in the course. It's very interesting in terms of sort of the social dynamics that are going on around these games also. So particularly for a globally oriented school like the one that we're at, there's all sorts of ways to integrate the action across boundaries within gameplay.
So I think that you just kind of go into the next question is how should Lamont Manhattan be innovating? And really what skill set should we be developing?
Yeah, I think you already are, innovating in so many ways. And, I don't think that anybody has to force this, jam this into an already very, very rich, curriculum here at Lamont. But I do think that there's some, particularly in science and in ELA and humanities, some really interesting game properties that are being developed. Some of them in academic labs and some of them, here in, Silicon Valley. I do think that there's a way to, think about the kind of collaborative, problem-solving, systems thinking-oriented curriculum that you have now, and supplementing it with things like Minecraft, things like some of the different, simulation games that are very, very popular, things like Historia, which is very, very good. So there are sort of a suite of games that have been developed with a lot of research behind them. Sort of the philosophy at Sesame Workshop is, do you all know that we're a nonprofit? We are. It's a hybrid business model, so obviously we sell some of the stuff that you don't. Those of you who have young children, sorry about Elmo. But so a lot of what's going on now is that folks who are creating these research-based game properties or app properties are having difficulty figuring out what should be their sustainable business model, because it's typically 2 men and a dog in some small apps developer space who maybe they'll break even if they sell 150,000 apps. So we're trying to work with developers who are in academic research shops to figure out ways to distribute, and one good idea is to begin to experiment within schools and school networks. So there might be an opportunity for us to talk to you about. There's one really interesting, game in development right now called GameStar Mechanic, which is great for elementary and middle school kids. It allows children, and some of you may be familiar with it, it allows children to learn STEM skills through making their own games. So, it's sort of like the first robotics for game making. And so we've been involved with the president and with a lot of other folks who are interested in building our STEM, workforce in the future, our science, technology, engineering, and math workforce, and by getting kids really engaged with making games themselves, both as a career exposure opportunity, much as the robotics work that you guys do is, but also, getting them to understand that games are a system. They're a set of different properties, and there's actually a good career path available to those who, become engineers or marketers of these kinds of games.
You've written a lot about the digital Wild West. So as parents and as educators, what do we need to watch out for?
Yeah. There's so much crap. There's so much crap out there. I mean, there's the phrase, the signal and the noise. I mean, the noise is being preferred. I think I saw an estimate that there are almost between the iTunes App Store and now Google Play and all the Android apps, almost a million apps, sorry. And of those, actually about 6 to 8% are marketed as educational. So right there you've got 70, 80,000 apps that are marketed as educational. In this report that I mentioned before, the Digital Wild West report, we took a look at the top sellers and a whole range of other things in that report, and we found that most of the stuff was really, it wasn't that it was so much low quality, it was not meeting the mark in terms of educational ambition. That most of the stuff that was on the top, sellers list were skill and drill, flashcard driven, basic literacy, basic math kinds of skills, and the 21st century skills, both embedded within sort of the major subject areas of math and reading, were nowhere in evidence. And in other words, comprehension skills, metacognitive skills, vocabulary building skills really were not present there. And then when you talked about science, for example, bupkis, really not very much at all. So we've been doing a lot of work to kind of encourage app developers to go where the educational needs of tomorrow are, as opposed to make a few bucks on, scaring, parents into, skill and drill types of activities.
So how do we do that, those educators, parents blaze their own trails? Or
one thing that's really interesting is that whereas 6 years ago when I began the CUNY Center, you really had big barriers to market entry, both in terms of the cost of designing on these platforms down to the issue of distribution. These things have flattened out a lot, both the cost of a developer kit, for example, to become an app maker yourself. We've run these competitions for teachers creating their own games and their own applications, and there's a lot of activity within the educational community to design really good stuff. And I would say the combination of educational innovation paired with better design sense, getting other partners to do the work. Like, I've seen a whole range of educational games and apps that are brilliant educationally now that will never, make it commercially because they don't have the right look or the right feel, or they don't have the right partnerships. So if we could flip it in the direction of really getting the education in, there's Intel inside, your computer, there needs to be education baked in. There needs to be Grand Theft education, not just Grand Theft Auto. And so we're working on that sort of thing. Can we flip the development model now that some of these barriers to entry have, been lowered? So we're doing R&D. We've got support from NSF. We're doing a lot of different things to try to get. So the Sesame model is crazy nut jobs like Jim Henson and Frank Oz originally, working with researchers, from Harvard and Teachers College and places like that. That model, that blend, that creative tension, which you don't often see in the development of, games or other technologies, I think is beginning to be reinvented now. It needs to go a lot further.
So you've digital play. I think everyone's asking themselves, okay, so when we get to this question, digital play, we hear you say, really can be a very positive factor in educating a child. But we're really concerned about the negative impact of digital play. This alone together, the kind of the anti-social environment that creates, or really becoming much less creative in the sense, the way that we know that we develop our creativity. So how can we feel comfortable giving our 3-year-old our cell phone and let him or her play games when we feel like, is this really benefiting the child, or is it just giving us a little extra time?
Yeah, this is a question I get more than any other question.
How do you answer that question?
What is the balance? What is the balanced digital diet? Well, let's first start with the facts. Okay, how many hours do kids consume media outside of school every day? Anybody know? Yeah. So the Kaiser Family Foundation and other research organizations have documented over the last 10 to 15 years the growth of digital media consumption outside of school. And it's roughly 6.5 hours, 636 in the last Kaiser study. If you include what your teenagers are doing in terms of media multitasking, it's about 8.5. And if you're talking about lower income families, it's even a heavier, media consumption. So of course, that's too much. It is. It's too much. On the other hand, you can't stop it. I mean, forget about it. Especially for older kids, once peer culture has, integrated. So
forget about it.
Forget about stopping it. Yeah, okay.
Tell us more.
Okay, some of you are turning it off. Some of you are limiting it. Of course you should. Of course you should. And how much is the exact right amount? I'm not going to say because I don't know, and it's different based on the quality of the content, the context within which it is, being presented, and the relationships that are built around it or not built around it. We have a national research project which is funded by Jeff Bezos' Family Foundation, the AARP, which is, did you all know that 2 million grandparents are taking care of kids under 12 in primary grandparent roles, in primary parenting roles now? AARP, Gates, and a foundation called the Heising-Simons Foundation, where we are delving into the quality of the content, the context in which it's being delivered, and the equity issues that surround the relationships that are being built, and the issues like what are the literacy skills that are being developed and advanced through digital play these days. So it's very, very complicated. I will give you an analogy. On Sesame Street, some of you might know that Cookie Monster is on a diet. Who knew? Cookie knows that cookies are not an anytime food, they're a sometimes food. And he knows that fruits and vegetables and all sorts of other good things are anytime foods, but that he ought to be a little selective about the cookie consumption. It's hard for him. In fact, he's, you guys know what executive functioning is. This year, Cookie Monster is learning about organization skills, working memory, control, self-regulation. He knows to wait, a little bit longer to eat the cookies. So the analogy here is, look, there is a digital media diet that includes wholesome foods, some of the things that organizations like mine do. They're educational media that are based on research. You can be sure that the kids, when they are engaging with our content and many others in the PBS network's content, that it's been tested, it is wholesome, it is educational, and it's entertaining. So those are anytime types of foods. Reading is an anytime type of food, and then there are sometimes foods. I mean, so there's a way of kind of extending this metaphor too far, but I believe that lots of folks are sort of coming along. The American Academy of Pediatrics suggests in its guidelines, and they've just changed them in the last week or so, that media consumption be limited to children over the age of 2 hours per day. Over the age of 2, no more than 2 hours a day. They don't recommend any passive media consumption because they believe that it's not only potentially harmful, but even more importantly, it's just not beneficial, and the opportunity costs associated with, parking your child in front of a screen of some sort is that they're not getting something else. They're not getting the give and take. They're not getting that rich literacy bath. They're not getting that ping pong match going on between the educator or the parent and the child. So I think that that's good guidance. However, I think for those of you who have children in your lives who are less than 2, I would say 2 things. One, if you want to say no, they will not suffer. If you want to say yes, there are certain things that you can do that will provide a rich, interactive literacy or other kinds of experience in which the child's first normative digital literacy experience is positive. So
give 2 or 3 of those things that we can do.
I mean, the first time that your 18-month-old is involved in, swiping a broken book, who he thinks is an iPad, go on YouTube, you will see hundreds of videos of toddlers swiping broken magazines and television sets and everything because they think that it should open up and give them their lovely, app. So the first time that something like that, first time that a toddler is interested in what you are immersed in yourself, show them it, pass it to them. There are all sorts of safe modes and all sorts of ways in which you can protect young children from getting to stuff that you don't want them to see. And I recommend all of that stuff. But it's all about the interaction with the peer or the older sib or the parent or the teacher. The joint media engagement is what we call it. The learning together moments can be just as rich and rewarding and sometimes even more delightful with some of the apps that I've seen than reading a book to a child. That said, I think, and we've just done a lot of research on the transition from print to digital books. That said, I would say that most parents rightfully believe that the kinesthetic cuddling and other tactile experiences of reading with print books to their children before they're age 5 is much more rewarding. I do think that's going to change a bit in the generation that we're looking at right now, but right now that's the preference.
I, a couple of years ago, read the book Hamlet's Blackberry, which talks about screen time, too much screen time. Families really need to have days devoted to no screens whatsoever for the whole family. And this author actually said now their weekends are screen-free as a family. Yeah. I think they probably told their teenager, you're screen-free as opposed to, given the option. How do you advocate for that? I mean, I hear you saying there's a real value of screen time and digital play, but yet actually having that conversation at the dinner table as opposed to texting it. How do you do that? How do you get the message across? Or do you advocate for that?
No, look, teens are a whole different.
Right.
I've been through 3. A whole different can of worms. And communication is essential. And if you are you guys familiar with the book that Drew mentioned by MIT professor Sherry Turkle? It's called Alone Together. And basically her premise is we're rewiring not only the brain but social relationships because there's a lack of intimacy among teens who are immersed in. I mean, there's a ubiquity of quote-unquote intimacy, but no real intimacy in terms of the number of friends and the kinds of conversations that are going on in short form across the many social media platforms. And she's concerned that teenagers and young adults are not committing to each other and a whole range of different things. I do recommend the book, even though it's very, very critical of, digital technologies in general. And she's been somebody who's been a backer of digital technologies throughout her esteemed career. Let me say this. I'm not sure that she's right. I think that it's still an open empirical question, that what I'm seeing in many of the communities, and the communities that she's talking about are largely our communities, but when I'm talking to a more diverse set of communities. We're doing a lot of research with early adopters within the Hispanic and Latino community, and there's a lot of reason for communication devices to help young people scaffold and support the older people's lives in a world that is hard to decipher. Things like immigration and naturalization services, things like the schools that are not welcoming. Digital technologies, and in particular smartphone technologies, are being used in very, very inventive ways to aid education and communication patterns in some of the less wealthy, communities that I'm viewing. So there's a different value that goes beyond entertainment, that goes to life skills and survival in a lot of these communities. So, I'm not sure in terms of this issue of the coarsening out of, we could have a whole conversation here about, the 24-hour, cable news cycle also being, incurring on the intimacy of relationships and coarsening the national and the civic dialogue. So there's a lot of stuff about the transition to an information age that are related to these issues that we're seeing with some of the problems that we have with youth, but I don't think that there's any evidence, like, for example, that violent video games and violent films lead to new towns, for example, which you hear often. I don't think that these things are wiring antisocial kids, but I do think that there are, at least at the margins and in an important way, we need to have this conversation. I am not at all opposed to, in fact, I've practiced having technology-free weekends in my own household, and it is tough. But, like, you rediscover board games, and you play charades, and, you do all sorts of really, really, really good stuff. Everything in moderation, and what Aristotle said, there's always the mean between two vices. Overregulation, underregulation, there's a pathway. Most of you know it. The last thing I would say is, in most cases, grandma's good sense works. It does.
Yeah, in our household, my wife has decided she's screen-free on Sundays, but she's always pumping me for information. Did you hear from the kids today? I said, no, you're screen-free today. So, yeah.
Well, that's still, that works. She's screen-free. She's just,
so she's getting it, another
she's
way.
got other information sources.
So this is kind of off script, but let me tell you. So with the synaptic pruning and all that stuff, the brain research. So do kids in the U.S. that have all this interaction, all this digital play, all this media in front of them, do they think differently from those individuals who do not have any exposure to that?
Yeah, some people think so. I don't know yet. Some people are, literally doing it.
And how does that play itself out? And then you don't know. But
yeah, it's very early. Like, I like to say that our kids are living sort of in the age of the Jetsonian age, the age of the Jetsons. And, like, our research enterprise is a little bit in the Flintstone age still. It's not that we haven't doing a lot of stuff on the research side. We are, but the technologies are changing so fast, and peer-reviewed research moves so quickly, so slowly, that we're not kind of getting it out. At the CUNY Center, we're creating these 6-month R&D cycles called quick studies, so that we're going in with what's called small ends, like, groups of 30 as opposed to groups of 300, and taking a quick look at what's going on with new technology. So I don't know yet. Like, we're working with some neuroscientists right now who, I say this with caution because, I've heard, the salutary benefits of violent video games. So we are looking actually at the salutary benefits of violent video games in this way. Let me explain. There are scholars, neuroscientists, and cognitive scientists in some of the really most interesting places, including Geneva and Harvard and University of California, who believe, based on their research in their laboratories, and you've probably read about some of this with, for example, surgeons and others. If you play a lot of video games that are called first-person shooters, your visual acuity increases, that you're actually rewiring your brain so that your vision becomes more precise. And all this research on laparosurgeons right now is very interesting. Meanwhile, a lot of the folks are taking a look at other kinds of executive level functioning here, working memory, organizational skills, the kinds of functioning that executives like Drew should do better at. And they're finding that there's a training effect. If you play Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or some of the other elaborate, immersive, what's called 3D action, first-person shooters, you advance your executive level functioning. Great, except the content of a lot of those things are like pornography. I mean, they're just not appropriate, especially for younger children. What to do? So we've teamed up, sort of a little bit of a dream team of neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, developmental scientists, game developers, creative people, to take that insight from neurobiology and say, could we take all the violence out and keep all the action in? And so with NSF funding right now, we're trying to figure out, any of you guys play Lumosity or Posit Science or any of these brain training games? Those are better than a lot of the other sort of, snake oil stuff that you'll see out there that promises a lot and doesn't really deliver. So we're working with some of the same scientists that are trying to develop these sorts of things. And I think there's going to be a lot of stuff on rewiring in a positive way. And I think that's probably going to be something that we live with. I mean, it's a little bit of Huxley's Brave New World sometimes, but we should be cautiously optimistic, is what I would say about this stuff getting into the right hands.
Yeah. So looking ahead, how do you see education changing in new and important ways for our kids with the technology?
I mean, what's going on here, I think, based on my limited but delightful experience with the board and the senior leadership here, is the wave of the future. I said upstairs, we had a little bit of advisory committee meeting before this. How many of you have seen the movie The Graduate? Most of you probably at some point saw Dustin Hoffman. So Dustin Hoffman is listening to his uncle. It's a famous scene.
But how many saw it the day after it came out?
I'm not sure that I did. It's what?
Jack, raise your hand.
late 70s? I don't know. What is The Graduate? No, not the 60s. No. 60s? All right, somebody look it up right now. So his uncle, who's a crazy guy, is telling him about, what are you going to do when you go to college? What's your future? He says plastics. Trust me, it's plastics, right? And my father said something different, which I won't get into. But I tell my kids, it's digital and global. And you've got this organization here focusing on what does it mean, not only to, be able to, compete and cooperate in the U.S., it's how do we compete and cooperate in the global age? How do we compete and cooperate in the information digital age? And so looking ahead, I really think that education is going to become much more personalized. Games are one way in that direction, but, the advent of Google, which is, believe it or not, less than 20 years old, all the world's information at our children's fingertips. The advent of all these massively online open courses where Drew's top faculty are going to be teaching kids around the world, some of them in place and some of them virtually and some of them both, over the course of the next 10 years if they do their work here right. So you're going to see personalized, very much global, networked, and you're also going to see, I think, a whole range of new career exposures that are going on. I think that this blended model of watching a lot of stuff online and getting the lecture when you're in higher education and perhaps some video-based activities that are homework activities at home, and then you're coming into school less to sit in a classroom, not that this is what's going on here, but there will be a lot of blending and a lot of small group work, project-based learning, global work teams that are going to be created on the 3 campuses here that Lehman represents. So personalized, global, digital technologies integrated, very much focused on projects and individual, sort of, whether it's badges or other kinds of recognition of mastery along the way, the competency-based as opposed to the seat time-based. You'll see a lot more blending of kids, some 3rd graders with 6th graders, some 9th graders with 12th graders who have, similar capacities in certain subject domains, but, who are 9th and 12th graders or 3rd and 6th graders in all sorts of other respects. So that's some of what I see
Certainly
coming.
exciting. So we're going to come out here,
Yeah.
and we're going to open up if you have questions. We have about 15 minutes for you. You have to catch your 10 minutes. Any questions? 1967.
Oh my God, Drew is right.
I won it.
I did not see it the night
I thought
after
it was 68, but 67. I don't, was it R-rated? I don't know.
Here's
All right.
to, well, most of you know Simon and Garfunkel did the soundtrack to that. Here's to you, Mrs. Robinson, a personal favorite.
Any questions?
Boom.
Hi. I have two. One is you talk about all the studies that you've done. Are these available?
Are you a parent of children
No,
here?
I'm director of technology here.
Okay.
So this is my type of thing. But where are these results available that we could actually look at these reports?
Yeah. Actually, thank you for asking that question.
Oh, you're welcome.
This week, and not available to the general public, we launched a new website with support, actually very generous support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is called, and this is one aspect of three main thrusts of our work. I've been talking a lot about games today, but we'll talk about other things another time. Gamesandlearning.org, which we acquired for $5.88, the name. We couldn't get gamesandlearning.com, which was a lot more expensive. Debuted this past, what's today? Thursday, on Monday. And it's in beta phase, and check it out. So it's a combination of all the research on game-like technologies, both in the academic sector and in the what I would call the ed tech and commercial sector, including a big analysis that we did of where the sector is going in the next 5 or 10 years. And sort of, yesterday, Google announced their new tablet loaded with all sorts of different apps and games and educational, intention. It's pretty interesting, guys. It's called Google Play for Educators. It's very interesting. So you can take a look at gamesandlearning.org. Everything at the CUNY Center is free and open, so we don't charge a penny for anything. So everything's online at cunycenter.org. Our reports on families and media, our reports on media multitasking, our reports on the digital Wild West, our scanning reports on what the apps are like there. We're kind of an open source field building enterprise. So, and send me an email. I'll respond eventually.
Hi. I know that research in early childhood...
Who are you?
I'm Lene Madonna. I'm a teacher here.
Okay.
And I know that early childhood research has shown that play and the development of play is an early indicator of future intellectual development. So my concern is when I go to a restaurant and I see 18-month-olds and 2-year-olds playing and their parents are talking and they're playing. Yeah. My kids used to play with the sweet and lows and pile the sugars. So
those houses are just great.
Yeah, absolutely.
How high can
it's
you
all
get
about
them?
the tactile. So my concern is, has any research been done regarding play development since all of this has changed?
It's such a good question. Yes, people are beginning to focus on playful learning. There's a group here in Manhattan called the Institute of Play, which has created actually a really interesting new charter school network, which is called Quest to Learn. It's a span school, so it's a 6 to 12 school, but they're going to be opening up elementary schools too. It was created by this very interesting Parsons professor. Her name is Katie Salen. Look online to see some of her talks. It's all about how we're losing the playfulness in technology. Yeah. But so this whole kind of technology thing, there's the guys who just want to sell you something that isn't going to be all that great. By the way, technology by itself is neutral. It's what you surround it with. It's what you embed it in. So please don't count me along, in the camp of technology by itself is going to transform everything. It's just not. That's already been proven. But this issue of play is you should go to the IOP, the Institute of Play website. It's called playforce.com, and check out some of the things that they're doing. They're interested in early childhood, but they've been focusing more on the middle school age, which might be helpful sort of in your practice. So yeah, I mean, playful learning is definitely what we should be encouraging, particularly for very, very young kids. Oh, on that issue of the 18-month-old in the in the restaurant or on the bus or whatever. So I just read a study that's coming out, I think in pediatrics, by some health researchers, where they went into the Boston area and they observed, without telling families, 55 families of kids ages 18 months to I think 3 years old, and they observed the play and the learn and what you said is absolutely what they're finding, that they commented on disrupted parenting, which is the parents are using the device to pass it along when they're too busy. And there's also been some really interesting tape, which maybe next time I come, I'll show you, of a baby trying to interact with a distracted parent, and it's very compelling. The baby is calling, the distracted parent looks for a second, and then the distracted parent gets into their, right? And the baby, you can see it, the baby's face, it's very poignant stuff. So look, there are dangers here, gang, but my message to you is it is here to stay. We are not Cassandra, but we're also not Pollyanna here.
Hi,
Hey.
I'm a parent. I have two 10-year-olds and a 12-year-old, Asla.
Hi, Asla.
I came in a little late. I don't know if you talked about this, but when my 3 kids spend 3 hours playing Minecraft, and they are playing with each other,
Yep.
and they're building and interacting, am I fooling myself? Thinking that, well, it's just like a board game, but they're doing it in an online format.
Sure.
Or if they are Skyping a friend,
Sure.
and they're having virtual play dates, right?
This
Everybody's in front of
This
their own
actually
computer.
sounds like a model, 21st century play date compared to a lot of other
It's
things that I've heard,
happening.
are going on. So, look, I did talk about Minecraft for a little
know
while.
you did, yeah.
It's, a lot of parents are a little concerned about how addictive it seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pretty good addiction. This is a fabulous game. There is so much built into it, some of which you just described. But
don't have to take them anywhere
but the
over the
kids got to do,
weekends. They
but the
still
kids
have
got to
play
do
dates.
something else too, Asla. So one of the
Well,
things
they
that I've been
do,
talking
yeah.
to the guy who is creating Minecraft EDU. So Minecraft teacher, he's actually well known on the web. He's left Columbia Prep, and he's starting within another small company, Minecraft EDU, in a very serious way. There's going to be built-in scaffolds and supports for parents and educators who might want to, what is the word? Program in that the characters get tired after about an hour and a half. Right? So we're going to actually try to build scaffolds in that are helpful to the adults and children's lives to give signal as opposed to noise to the youngsters to move on.
Thank you.
Time for one more question.
It can be 2 more questions.
2 more questions, all right?
That way people won't think they have to have the best last question.
I'm going to put you on the spot as
Ginny.
an old friend.
Yes.
So looking a year ahead, what do you see? What's going to be the big new thing that parents and teachers are either going to be
Yeah.
fascinated by or horrified?
By the way, there's lots of things, Ginny. I will be wrong, but there's lots of prognostication of what's coming, next. And you can read a lot of these reports at Project Tomorrow, which I really recommend as educators and as parents. If you take a look at some of these trends reports, they're kind of interesting. I mean, you can't trust a lot of what's in them, but they give you a sense of what's being discussed and what's being invested in. So 2 things: wearables. This is a Fitbit. This is like any of you know about Nike's Fuel Band. I mean, it's regulating. It's monitoring the number of steps, and so I think health stuff and wearables are going to become, maybe not in the next year, but more and more wearables, and kids are going to be early adopters of the wearables. And then I think that we're going to see a lot of hybrids of you can take the technology into the real world. I think you can see a lot of press to take a Minecraft and add a Lego and an erector set and a lot of other products or other experiences that are a blend of the real and the virtual. Part of this is because adults are kind of catching up and pushing back. So, I think that you'll continue to see more games, more electronic toys, especially for the younger set, but you'll see more sophisticated blends of transmedia experiences for the children.
Mac?
Was that responsive?
So as a father of four, I really struggle with the
God
number
bless.
of, yes. And I am one of those parents who has 4 iPads for the 4 kids at dinner when we go out.
Now that's just not good parenting, I want to say.
I get to know my wife at dinner. It's lovely. So, absolutely.
I mean, maybe in 10 years we're going to see the divorce rate go down.
But my question is, I do, as you referenced before, I have trouble differentiating between the 70,000 apps that are available for my kids.
Yeah.
Is there available, or is anyone working on a taxonomy or ranking system that helps us understand the educational impact and efficacy?
You asked that because I meant to mention it earlier, Mac. So, yes. Mac is concerned about curation and discovery in the digital Wild West. Like, how are we doing it? So, luckily, there's some really, really smart people who are worrying about this. And if you guys follow Common Sense Media, I mean, you might have for films and games and other things. So, with a lot of support from Susan Crown, who's a member of the Crown family in Chicago, and now more recently from Bill Gates himself, they've created an educational rating system that is done by educators that is looking at hundreds of apps, every month, and it's free of charge. It's a subscription that you can get. It's by ages and stages and subject domain and a whole variety of different things. It's a star rating system that is part expert and user-generated, crowdsourced, and I highly recommend what they're doing, both through Common Sense's regular educational game rating, but also something that they've just introduced, which is called, Michael, senior moment, Graphite. So these are all available on the web free of charge. There's also a good technology review, which is run by a developmentalist in central New Jersey, Warren Buckleitner, which is called the Children's Technology Review, and that's pretty good. And then there are a bunch of new sites that are kind of cropping up. Yogi Play would be an example of one of these. There are all sorts of analytic sites. Apps Annie is another example of this, where you can kind of go and take a look at what's popular. And then there's some amazingly wonderful blogs that I totally trust to get my information from. 2 that I love are The Brilliant Report by Annie Murphy Paul. It's really, she's a brilliant writer. She's very, very strong. And another one I like a lot is, and Ginny probably knows this one, is Mind Shift, which is WQED and NPR in San Francisco, which is following all things innovative, all things digital in education. So that's a little bit of information from me today. I hope it was useful.
Okay, Michael, we do appreciate your time greatly, but we're going to leave here, and if we just came in the last 2 minutes and we left and acted like we were here the whole time, and sharing everyone what a wonderful evening it was with you, what were the 3 points that we should share with our friends that weren't here tonight, or that we're going to tell them that you really want us to remember tonight?
Point 1, relax a little bit. We got enough on our plates, so that this shouldn't be like the huge worry about, am I doing the right thing with the 3 hours, or, is there some real great harm that's coming to, my 2-year-old niece who loves her iPad and screams and yells when I take it away from her? Like, relax, follow your instincts. It's really okay. Most of you, most of your community actually knows what they're doing in terms of being effective, engaged, parents and educators. So that's the first thing. Number 2, this is R&D. I mean, this is all about active exploration. This is all about an educational journey. We're all pioneers in the digital Wild West. We can do this. But, we've got to figure out a plan. We need curating tools. We need to share them across our networks. We got to be talking to each other about the different solutions to the Minecraft addiction or whatever it is. So number 2 is community. Curation, discover, share, network. You absolutely should, because frankly, there isn't, a lot of very solid evidence about what's working in education. Number 3, read and bring in experts. Folks are moving quickly in this area. There's a lot of stuff that seemed promising 2 years ago. There's something much more promising now. By delaying, sometimes you're in better shape. So get a sense of expertise. You've got some wonderful advisors who can help you with that, but I would say that the modern global school has an advisory group that both is very, very interested in bringing what is best from Dewey to Vygotsky to what's being disruptive, learning in all the other sectors, a la Clay Christensen. So you got to think about blending the old with the new, and that is based on advice, investment in sort of new models that you would do. So research.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for Michael.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
It was our pleasure. Thank you. So thank you for coming out. Encourage friends to watch the video on our website. And stay tuned for Speaker 2 in our speaker series. Right, Liz? All right, as she texts away. Thank you.